There we go. Okay. There we go. Okay, and this and that. Okay. I think we're working. All right. The bits and the little packets and the internet might be coming kind of slow today because it is really cold, and I assume that as soon as the little packets leave my house, they get slowed down by the yeah. It's negative 14 outside right now, Fahrenheit. For those of you who are not in the U.S. And who use a normal, system of measurement, that is negative 25 Celsius. So. You may hear the furnace running in the background. Normally, when I do a live show, I turn the thermostat way down so the furnace doesn't kick in. And then I have to turn it back up once the show is done. But I think today we're not going to do that because I don't want the house... First of all, I think it will probably... If I turn it all the way down to like 60 or something like that, it'll still probably kick in, halfway through, 3/4 of the way through the show. But yeah, so there's going to be some background noise, and I apologize for that. But I hope everyone else is doing stuff and having a good time and being safe. Good morning from sunny Guadalajara. It's sunny here. It's real bright. It's very snowblindy outside right now, but it is, it is not warm sunny. It's a different kind of sunny. Let's see here. Good morning from wintry Scotland. Morning from freaking cold Winnicott. Nothing beats negative 35 wind chill. Yes, that's the other thing too. It's not just negative 14 Fahrenheit. It's also negative 35 roughly wind chill. And again, that's Fahrenheit. Hello from central Poland. It's cold. Yeah, it's cold, I think, in the entire planet. Even in Portugal, even in California, it's cold everywhere. Negative 25, yeah. How are you alive? Well, I'm indoors. That helps, I think. And there's a furnace and stuff like that. And so we got that going on. My cat is wrapped up in my bathrobe, says Matthew Sears. It's good to hear. It's Saber's Edge was negative 40 here yesterday. Fun fact, negative 40 is the same in Fahrenheit and as it is in Celsius. They're the same temperature. It's where they meet. Weird. Anyway. Sweet Fancy Moses, Uncle Adam. Negative 25 Celsius. Yeah. It's, I don't plan on going outside. So there's that. Temperature issues are real. My kegged beer in a fridge in my garage is frozen. See, that's not good. Yeah, you don't want that. Glad to have a plus in front of our temperature. Yeah, that is helpful. Good morning from Macomb. It's negative 6 with negative 24 wind chill. I got some models primed in the garage yesterday. Needs a second coat today. Good luck with that. Yeah. Let's see here. Good morning from snowy Long Island, Uncle Adam. Glad I caught the stream. Absolutely. It's not cold in Qatar. Well, I suppose. Yeah, that makes sense. Still warm in Thailand. Yeah, that also probably makes sense as well. Greetings from cold Detroit Nerd Bunker, doing some character painting this morning, finishing Gotrek Garrison just for the heck of it. Yeah, I kind of did some just for the heck of it yesterday, too. If you follow me on Twitter, I just was, I had this model it's a Harbinger of Decay, that it's been primed and highlighted, like Zenithal highlighted, probably for 2 years, just sitting, and finally yesterday I was just like, and then I just worked on him. And I took pictures and posted them on Twitter as I was kind of going through progress photos. He's nearly done. I did a relatively quick paint job on him, but he's nearly done. I got to finish up his base and maybe just a couple more highlights and things like that. So I'll finish him up today. So if you don't follow me on Twitter, you could see more about it if you do. It's just at Tabletop Minions. Let's see here. What else have we got here? Coldest ever I ever felt was negative 45 Celsius when I was in Russia. Yeah, that's no fun. Hello from Tampa, Florida. Super Bowl right here. That's true. Superb owl. I have to say it that way, I think. Let me see here. Negative 8 in North Chicago. Yeah, Epic Die. I get you. 25 here. Heat keeps going out. That's no fun. Yeah. Hello from Loopberg. Is it Loopberg or Lupberg? I'm probably saying it wrong. Germany. Working on Minus Tirith Soldier for Middle-earth strategy battle game from GW. Nice. Sitting in Atlanta thinking that 41 is cold. Well, for Atlanta, 41 is kind of cold. Greetings from Austria. Try to Zenithal highlight on my Plague Bearers. Works great with contrast paints. Yeah, like I said, that... and I don't have a picture I can show you. I mean, I got pictures on my phone, but I can't... Well, maybe I can. I mean, not well. You won't see it well. Let's see here. YouTube just emailed me to tell me that I was live on my channel, so that's nice. I'm glad that I have that kind of feedback. Yeah, I don't think that that's gonna... Anyway, he looks like that. It's not a very... Go look on Twitter if you get the chance. That's the most recent photo. But, yeah, it's a lot of the color there is going to be contrast. Like, the horse is basically all contrast. The cloak is all contrast. So, it works out well. Adam, I'm thinking about making some Chaos Chosen for my Slaves to Darkness from some Bloodletters. What do you think? Chaos Chosen from Bloodletters. It'd be kind of cool. Yeah, I like the Bloodletter models. I love them. They're specifically great, I think. Saw Kickstarter Lurkers of the Deep and some Fishmen for an Innsmouth setting. Thought of you. Yeah, someone else mentioned that to me, too. I thought it was kind of interesting. Trying to break out the hoodies here in Wisconsin. Oh, yeah, it's been hoodie weather for me for quite a while, actually. Especially being in the basement. It's kind of chilly in the basement, so... VJ Morph, how you doing? Says, Irregulars Q1 mini swap will be closing in a few days. So if anyone wants to be a part of this quarter's swap, jump in on the Discord now. So if you're an Uncle Adam's Irregular, and what that is that I have a Patreon, and there are 3 levels to the Patreon. There's a $1 a month, kind of like a, here you go, here's a tip, you know. Maybe you run ad blocker and you want to say, well, here, you know, that's fine. And then there's a $2 level, and then there's a $4 level, and it is the $4 level you get access to the Discord, and I do a live show on YouTube just for the Irregulars every month, like a private live show, not like a, you know, anyway, it's just for those people. There's nothing, you know, weird going on. Anyway, my point is that yeah, so we also do a mini swap where, you know, if you've ever heard of a mini swap, it's basically like a bunch of people get involved, and then this person paints a thing for this person, and this person paints a thing for this person, and everybody gets a model, and everybody paints a model. So if you're interested, take a look at that. Patreon.com/Tabletop Minions if you're into that, and you know, it helps to support the channel and all that kind of stuff. Plus, you get access to the Discord. Working on some Rogue Trader era Terminators, Admech Skatari, Chaos Warriors, and some BFG Chaos Escorts. Nice. I've been enjoying the Skatari. I've been painting Skatari on Twitch. I painted 5 Infiltrators first. Did those over several weeks or whatever. And now I'm getting close to the end of painting 6. Well, it's technically 5 Vanguards and 1 Ranger, with the big long sniper rifle thing on a stick. Yeah, and they're interesting. I'm enjoying painting them. They're fun. I'm just doing kind of quickie sort of tabletop jobs, but they're working out well. But yeah, they are. How am I trying to say this? Spindly, you know, but I don't know, still enjoyable. I'm painting them very differently than the normal color scheme. I'm not going with the kind of red jackets or coats or whatever. I'm going more of a brown. I'm trying to make them look almost like a leather duster that like a cowboy would wear a little bit. Some people have mentioned it's a little Firefly looking. So that's kind of interesting, but yeah. So yeah. Hello from North Carolina, building Kraga's Ravagers and cracking into Dire Chasm on this brisk 40 degree Fahrenheit morning. Oh yeah. Yeah, you know, I have a copy of Dire Chasm, and I don't see myself ever painting any of the models in there. Like, both of the factions in there are factions that I just don't have any interest in, and it's a bummer, you know what I mean? Because I really like the Warhammer Underworlds in general, and I'm really looking forward to the Lizardmen and all that kind of stuff. But man, oh man, that, I gotta put my phone over here, it's making too much noise. Man, just like Cow Elves versus Slaanesh. I'm like, I can't decide who I want to paint less. I don't know. It's just a personal preference. The models are well done. I always want to say that generally. unless they're not, I suppose. But in this situation, again, models are very, very well sculpted. They're very cool technically and all that kind of stuff and everything. And but just not my aesthetic, not my interest. You know what I mean? You can say this is spectacular ice cream, but I do not enjoy this flavor. It's kind of like that. Yeah. Ugh. So anyway, I'm waiting for some of the other stuff to come out for Direcast, and I'll probably pick some of that stuff up. So. Manuel Revere, good morning, Uncle Adam. Any thoughts on when Cursed City is coming out and price? Very excited for this. No, I don't have any good gauge on that, and they haven't told me anything or anything like that. So, but yeah, it's I'm looking forward to the models, especially the skeletons that they showed off this week. It's just like the first couple of models they showed off already. I was like, oh, those are nice. And then they showed off, it was like, what, 3 different skeletons this week? I was like, man, like that's going to be a thing. You know what I mean? So, definitely. I want to do a unit of Chosen, but the models currently unavailable, or the models that are currently available aren't to my liking. Well, I mean, that's one of those reasons why you look into kit bashing if you can. But yeah, it depends. I mean, sometimes it's an easy kit bash, sometimes it's a bit harder. Excuse me, I have to sneeze. Great day for 3D printing terrain and enemies for Rangers of Shadowdeep. Yep, it does sound like that. Absolutely. Greetings from England, working on some old Battle from Macragge, Space Marines and Tyranids for that nostalgic feeling. Nice. Private Dancer. No, that's not how that's working. Hello, Uncle Adam. I'm painting an army today. Bought a 2,000 point of Skaven from a guy for $200. That's 60 Plague Monks, 60 Clan Rats, those siege weapons, and Vermin Lord. I still think it's crazy. I mean, that's a good price, absolutely. That's a lot of models to paint, though. I will tell you. I painted 13 Plague Monks on Twitch, and it's a lot of models. I mean, I would, and I don't know, if it was me, I would probably break them up into squads of about 10 and paint them that way, but I would probably alternate between squads of 10 Plague Monks, and then I would do 10 Clan Rats, and then I would maybe go back to Plague Monks, and then Clan Rats. I think if you try to power through and just do all the Clan Rats or all the Plague Monks, you may get demotivated. You may be like, this is no fun. So alternating back and forth might be something to think about. But everybody's different, so that's just the way I'd do it. Cow Elves, Fishmen, for your bingo, Beastmen, and Rat Boys. Well, there you go. The skeletons look so amazing. I'm looking forward to Cursed City. Yeah, same here. Absolutely. I put away all my hobby stuff until I get my wastewater operator certification. Got to stay motivated. Nice. Do you think Kill Team is on the way out? I'm assuming the word think is in there somewhere. No, I don't. What system do you think would replace it? Combat Patrol? No. I mean, that Combat Patrol is just a size of 40K, and it's a totally different game. Frankly, I mean, like the stats are, they're not the same, but they're sort of the same. And a lot of the stuff is very much 40K like, whereas Age of Sigmar and Warcry are quite a bit different. That all being said, the fact that they're coming out with, if it was going out, I think that they would have probably decided to not do the Pariah Nexus thing, which they've already announced is coming out some soonish. They haven't exactly announced when. But they did show it off on Twitch, I don't know, a couple of Saturdays ago or whatever. So we know what's in it and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, again, I'm suspecting they might come out with a second edition of Kill Team. And if they do, it would most likely be in summer or fall. Generally, I would think summer, but because of the pandemic, stuff might get pushed back to fall just because that's the way these things work these days. So yeah, that's potential. Good afternoon from the Netherlands. Finally catching one live. Working on my Caradon Overlords. Love the steampunk dwarf pirates. Yeah, I do want to paint some of those eventually. I know there is a warband for Warhammer Underworlds that I don't. Well, I might own it, but I don't think I do. So I should try to find it if I can, and then go from there. Greetings from a snowy southernmost UK. Currently working on Untamed Beast from Warcry. Nice. I am. Yeah, so like the subject of today's video is about, monsters and things like that in Warcry because I'm interested in doing some of that. Now, admittedly, the monster in the thumbnail thusly, the Ogroid Myrmidon, technically not a monster. I mean, he's monstrous. He looks like a monster. But as it turns out, in the book, which I have right here, for Agents of Chaos, and I've talked on Friday about all of the new books that we get for Warcry, technically he's an ally. He's not in the monster section of this book. He is an ally. And it took me a while to find him, to be perfectly honest with you, because I kept skipping over the pages. The monsters in the Chaos book for Warcry are monsters and thralls. There's a Chimera, Slaughter Brute. Slaughter Brute, I don't know. I'd have to look at the model. Like they only show you, like in the book, when they show you like the pictures and stuff like that, like the Slaughter Brute is right there, and they show like a super zoomed in close up of his face. So you can't, like, it'd be like trying to figure out what I look like when you just see this much of me. I mean, that would be kind of weird, right? That wouldn't, anyway. But yeah, and so one of the monsters though that is available is the Mutilith Vortex Beast. I think I'm saying that right. Yes, Mutilith Vortex Beast, and I have one of those already, like a third painted. I may want to repaint it, and also a Chaos Gargant. I have a Chaos Gargant built. I just don't have it beyond that. So those are monsters for Chaos that I could add, and I'm looking forward to doing that potentially. Hellbit Abomination, Cygor, Gorgon. But then, yeah, the allies for Chaos are the Fomoroid Crusher, which you may have seen. I think I have one of those down in the basement in the box. There's the Mind Stealer Spheranx, which is that kind of kitty with the weird face. That one I don't have, and I don't like the kitty's face. But I've seen a bunch of people that I know paint it. And then the Ogroid Myrmidon, which if you've been watching me on Twitch, the Ogroid Myrmidon is in partial... It's in progress. I built it on a stream over at Sam's house. Geez, it seems like 60 years ago. Back in 2019, it was Sam and Vince and I, and then. But yeah, so it was a good time, and then I actually finally primed him and started kind of working on him a little bit recently. Let's see here. Looks like the snow is finally starting to make a proper go of it here in Edinburgh. Nice. I mean, unless you don't like that kind of thing. Good morning, Uncle Adam. Happy Sunday. I want to get into Kill Team Warcry, and I was wondering how much terrain I need to start playing. Well, I mean, both of those games are played on a 22 by 30 inch board, which is relatively small, so you don't need a ton, but you do need some. Both of those games are, well, specifically, I would say Warcry you need a little bit less terrain than you do for Kill Team. Kill Team becomes a very different game if you don't have much terrain. If you have very little terrain, then it just becomes a shooting fest and everybody dies. Having cover and stuff like that to hide behind, it helps your models stay alive just a little bit longer. Whereas Warcry, for the most part, is more of a hand-to-hand combat style game. So in that situation, you don't need quite as much terrain. It's not as important. So if you're concerned about that, you may want to ease a little bit more towards Warcry. But also consider whether you want these models to be able to do something you can take into 40K, or whether you want to take these models and something you can take into the Age of Sigmar kind of stuff. You have those options as well. I've used the Carnosaur as a proxy Chimera for a few games. So much fun to use as a wandering monster. Yeah, that would be not bad. I think I have a Carnosaur model on the sprue somewhere in the basement because I bought the Lizardmen Start Collecting box a number of years ago. Hi, Uncle Adam. I was confused by Friday's video. Are the mercenaries in Warcry no longer mercenaries now? Can you add them into your Warband at creation now? Kinda, yeah. Like, mercenaries are not... They kind of got rid of mercenaries and allies for the most part, really. Honestly, the whole Monsters and Mercenaries book is basically no longer... I mean, other than maybe, like, the... what do you call it? The... not the rules, the scenarios and the whatever. Most of the rest of it, I think, is pretty much no longer used because everything else has been replaced. So yeah, I don't know. It was a weird move because this book is not that old. This book is from I bet they don't put it in there, do they? Yeah, this book is from 2019 is when this was published, and it's already basically, and admittedly we're 2021, but it's early 2021, and it's the new 4 books that came out basically kind of replaced that. So it's a little different that way. Allies has changed quite a bit. Like you can take an ally from a different group. So let's say you're playing Slaves to Darkness Warband. You could take a different Chaos model and bring it in as an ally, but you have specific, scale. Like you can only do so many of them and this and that and the other thing. And it's interesting. It's a weird thing. So yeah. Brian Griffith says that the kitty comes with 2 faces and 2 sets of horns and braids. Yeah, I've seen that. I guess I should look at it a little bit closer again. BJ Morph says, speaking of Vince, I ordered some sunny skin tone and light flesh this week for my universal highlight color. Nice. He's a national treasure, that Vince Venturella. You should definitely be watching him on YouTube if you get the chance. Uncle Adam, just stopping by to say hi before I head to church. Keep up all the good work. We love you. Well, thank you, Sir William the Bold. I appreciate it. If you're just starting, I would buy like $100 of MDF sci-fi terrain and try it out. Well, I just got some terrain from Australia. It took a while, but it got here finally. But it's some MDF terrain from a company called Brutal Cities. I think it's called Brutal Cities. And it's like brutalcities.com, maybe? I don't know. But it is a lot of buildings. There's a particular type of architecture called brutalism. And in brutalism, it's a lot of big cement block buildings, a lot of very just boxy, like Eastern European. There's a lot of brutalism going on over there. Like you think of maybe even like Soviet buildings, like older stuff and things like that. And it's just very cool. And I'm going to use it for a couple of different games, Zona Alpha being one of them. But I could use it for cyberpunk stuff to some degree as well. But yeah, it's just really kind of interesting. It's very different than a lot of other MDF stuff that I've seen out there. And so I bought a bunch of it, and then it took a month and a half to get here. But it's from the other side of the planet, and it's in the middle of a pandemic, so I understand. But it just showed up last week. I finally started Gloomhaven yesterday after it collecting dust on my shelf for a few years. What a box. Yeah, I can see the Gloomhaven box from over here. Years ago, when Gloomhaven first came out, I won a copy of it at a thing that I was at, a seminar. And then I was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to play this, and it weighs a lot. And so I sold it to my friend Matt from Game4, from the Game4 podcast. And then now I am working with the folks from Board Game Geek, and we're working on a series of videos about how to get into painting miniatures if you're like a board gamer, and now you have lots of board games like Gloomhaven. And you want to paint those little folks that are inside. And so when we were kind of coming up with the idea for the series and stuff, and it'll be on their channel eventually, coming soon. Anyway, they were like, well, why don't we just get you a copy of Gloomhaven and you can work on those pieces? I'm like, okay, cool. So, and I'd already painted some of the Gloomhaven expansion pieces, the Jaws of the Lion. I had painted some of those for a virtual convention that Board Game Geek was like hosting, and I'd done some of that stuff on Twitch back in fall, I think. So I've got some background in it, using those models. But yeah, it's fun. It always makes those models look better, I think. Let's see here. To simplify, basically, you can take 2 leaders. One counts as a hero, which can be from another faction. Yeah, there's a bunch of different rules, but that's a pretty good simplification. So yeah, so that's kind of cool. Yeah. First time catching the stream in months. Good afternoon from the Netherlands. Well, absolutely. Thanks for coming. We'll continue to sing the praises of WorldWorks games, papercraft terrain, and available in fantasy, in sci-fi, modern, and woodland flavor. Woodland flavor. Yeah, I've never been into papercraft much. Like, I like the concept, but I've always gone at least MDF or more. Like, I'm going to be building some terrain soon. I'm looking forward to. So here's a question. You know that pink foam that you sometimes use for making terrain and stuff like that? In colder areas of the country or the world, it's the pink foam that you put on the outside of your house, or sometimes the inside of your house, as it goes in the walls. You don't just have pink foam on the outside of your house. That would look weird, and the birds would steal it. But it's this stuff you get it at the hardware big mega store in giant 4x8 sheets, And it's very, very, it's like styrofoam, but it doesn't have the little balls like white styrofoam does. It's super, super fine pink foam. There's a name for it. I can't remember it, frankly. But a lot of people do like to use it to carve it and stuff like that to make terrain. What's your favorite way, if you've worked with that stuff before, to kind of seal it or coat it? I'm always concerned because that stuff is so light, and I've seen it at game stores in the past as like in-house terrain if you come here to play, and it just gets chipped up and you can see bright pink coming through on the pieces of rock. What have you used in the past to coat that kind of terrain so that when you paint it, like do you use like spackle? I'm not sure, joint filling compound, that might be what it's called overseas, but around here it's called spackle. Stuff like that. So anyway, my point is that if you got some ideas in the chat, that would be great. Hey Emily, how you doing? We just played Gloomhaven all day yesterday. It was a blast. Nice. Yeah, I've heard great things. I got some of the Archon Studios Dungeons and Laser Tile stuff. Pretty well made. Yeah, I've seen some of that plastic terrain too, and I'm interested in it. It's interesting how different people can feel about aesthetics. I love the Chaos Kitty, but the plastic Chimera I think is absolutely awful. I don't know if I've seen the plastic Chimera. I should go back and look. Hello from Texas, working on a dice holder, trying to find motivation to paint my Iron Jaws, so I'm close to being done. I just can't find the motivation to finish. Well, working on something else is sometimes a good idea, to kind of just switch your focus a little bit. Makes sense. Let's see here. Let's see. XPS foam is what I'm being called. Pink foam equals XPS foam. Someone said GPS foam. That seems like a typo. But yes. Mod Podge. Oh, I hadn't thought about Mod Podge. That's what I'm hearing a lot of, Mod Podge. Is it Mod Podge or Mod Podge? I thought it was Mod Podge. 50-50 wood glue and water. Use Mod Podge and black paint from Black Magic Craft. Oh, I'll have to watch some Black Magic Craft. I didn't notice that he talked about that, but that makes a good sense. Mod Podge with black paint mixed in. Nice. I'm hearing that a lot. That must have come from over there. That makes sense. Mixed with paint seems to be the go-to. Otherwise, hello, other Black Magic Craft fans. See, there you go, yeah. Sunday morning painting from Ontario. Good day. I covered the rigid foam core with drywall. Oh, that's kind of cool, yeah. Let's see here. A lot of people talking about Mod Podge. Someone was telling me yesterday about using spackle, but I'll look at the Mod Podge too. I'll definitely watch some Black Magic Craft on that as well, because I've got some large sheets of pink foam. Like I bought. It's one of those deals where you go to the hardware store and then you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to buy like a giant sheet of this pink foam and it's going to be great. I'll be able to make so much terrain with it. And then you get it back to your car and you drive a small hatchback and you're like, I have not thought this very well through. But the thing about that pink foam that's great is that you can just, out in the parking lot, you can kind of prop it up against the car and then just sort of karate chop it into pieces and stuff like that, because you're not going to, you don't need a piece that's 4x8, but they don't sell it any smaller than that. So you just basically smack it up with your hands and stuff and everything like that and look like a doofus in the parking lot, and then you throw all those parts in your car and then you drive away. But the upside is they don't have those little balls floating all over the place like the normal white styrofoam does, because it's not that kind of styrofoam. So it works out quite nicely. But yeah, so I've got a big bunch of chunks of it in the basement. I've got some that's like relatively thinnish, maybe 3/4 of an inch. And then I've got some that I bought at some point later that's quite thick, so that I could use it for chunkier like rock formations and stuff. Instead of having to glue multiple layers together and then carve it, I just have a much thicker, piece of it. That part was a little bit harder to beat up in the parking lot though. So let's see here. What else have we got? Sandable auto filter, Bondo. I've been told to use Bondo for the stuff that like 3D printed filament stuff. FDM, is that right? Anyway, the filament stuff, because sometimes you get those sort of ridges in the filament, when the printing and all that stuff. And my friend Mac the Maker, he showed me ways to use Bondo and then sand it and smooth it. And it won't work everywhere. You need to kind of have larger, flat, or kind of slightly curved places. But in detail areas, it's a little bit harder. But it's a way that it works. So there, yeah. Insulation foam comes in blue and pink. Luke's APS Scenics has some great videos on using it. I just saw a video that Luke posted yesterday. Well, maybe he posted. I watched it yesterday. It's relatively recent, but he's talking about how he hasn't been doing a lot of videos about terrain, but he's going to be doing more videos about terrain soon and stuff like that. So yeah, I hadn't. I subscribed, but I hadn't been keeping up with him in a while. In regard to terrain, I do like using a combination of XPS foam, Mod Podge, coating, and Sculptamold. Sculptamold. I'm not familiar with that. Sculptamold. I should look that up at some point. All right, then. I've clicked the wrong button. Dang it. Okay. So, when chopping up pink foam, do you shout "Pachow"? I mean, maybe you don't shout it. I may say it under my breath. I guess there's that. Interestingly enough, filler is also super good for filling gaps. Makes sense, I guess. I show how to do it in my newest video on the channel. Nice. Buy one of those buck or less utility razor knives and cut it up from the parking lot. You know, I have terrible luck with those darn knives. The ones where, like, you snap off the pieces, like when you're like, oh, it's dull now, and you snap off the piece or whatever, and they're like, I don't know, 6 inches long, and you go, almost every single one that I've ever used, always, when I'm cutting it, it goes back. I don't know if I'm just buying ones that are too cheap. I don't know. I hate the smell of Bondo. Grab a respirator. That's a good idea. Picturing Uncle Adam karate chopping pink foam in the parking lot. Spit take with coffee. Well, yeah. Battlescribe had 4 massive books to update. Have mercy on them. I agree. I understand that. I was surprised though when I looked, and somebody mentioned it also in the comments after Friday's video. They're like, well, I just told it to update and it was updated. But I like whenever you open up Battlescribe, it's always like, oh, hey, you want us to check and you're like, yes. And then you do that, and then it was like, okay, all up to date. And then I went and looked, and then the most recent Warcry was from September. And I'm like, well, that's weird. And then I even went in and manually went to the Warcry thing and said, update from repository, or that's not the proper word, but whatever. And it was like, yeah, no, you're good. I'm like, okay, that's weird. But then, so either it happened literally the next day, or something just wasn't working on my end. I guess that's possible. Maybe I needed to update Battlescribe first, and I hadn't done that in a while. I don't know. Hard to say. Black Magic Craft also talks about Sculptamold. Nice. All right. Never knew this hobby would be leading to assaulting defenseless foam in an alley behind Lowe's. Well, technically it was in the parking lot, and it wasn't in Lowe's actually. It was I think it was Menards. It's more of a Midwest kind of chain. It's funny because there's Menards, and Menards has been a Midwest staple for big, huge hardware store for years. And then, I don't know, 5-10 years ago, all of a sudden Lowe's just popped up right next to them. They're like literally like directly next to each other. So that's kind of interesting. You can also make your own Sculptamold with cellulose insulation and plaster of Paris. It's super cheap and it will last you forever. Luke at Geek Gaming made a video about it. I forget what he calls it, but yeah, I think I bought some. Not the stuff that he sells, I don't think, because it was like super crazy expensive to kind of get shipped over here. And so I bought something basically the same, but it comes in big bags. And it's like a mixture of almost like a papery stuff with like some sort of plaster. And I got it, I think, on Amazon. I forget what it's called though. But yeah, I haven't used it yet, but it's ready to go. Hot wire cutter is a great tool. Yes, I have a hot wire cutter. Not the fancy. There's a company that makes a tabletop hot wire cutter called Proxxon, I think, which sounds like an evil robot of some sort. I think it's like Proxxon, and it's like, I don't know, it's like almost $200 or maybe $150. But it is like almost like, yeah, it's like this big table surface, and then there's a big arm that sticks out, and then the wire goes down, and then you can kind of slide, almost like you're using a table saw. And it's got like a little guide over here, so you can make straight cuts much more easy and all that kind of stuff. I don't have one of those, but I do have like a big handle that's got a couple of D batteries in it, and then there's like a big thing and a wire, and then yeah, that works out pretty well too. With all the vampire theme releases by GW, do you think it fits into their sales model to keep that on track and release a vampire Blood Bowl team this year? They don't have one yet. I thought they did have a Blood Bowl vampire team. I mean, it might be. They might very well possibly do it. You know what I mean? Yeah, I could see that. GW has all these vampire reveals, and now I can't find the Vampire Warhammer Chronicles Omnibus anywhere. Must be very popular. All you need is white glue and builder's sand. Is builder's sand very fine? Is it that stuff that you put down when you're, like, building a deck or something like that? Whoops, I'm getting coffee refill. Yeah, because, like, there was this stuff when we... A number of years ago, we paid a contractor friend to... thank you, dear. Behind the house, do some landscaping stuff with pavers and walls and stuff like that.
He sort of hates us.
Well, he after he got done, he's like, now I remember why I don't like doing this. And so we were like, well, sorry. But he did a good job. But yeah, the thing is when you lay down like pavers and stuff like that, you're supposed to put down 2 different grades of sand. You don't just put down sand. You put down like one kind of sand and another kind of sand, and then it sorts of levels it, sort of. I don't exactly understand it, but that's why we paid him to do it, because I don't know. But yeah, one of the grades of sand was really, really super fine, so I wonder if that's what it was. Because that'd be good for just terrain basing anyway, maybe even model basing. Grimgar says, I love my Proxon. I've thought about getting one. Honestly, mainly just because it would be really nice to be able to make bricks easier. You know what I mean? Like to be able to make like little tiny bricks, not really, really tiny, but like for making like a ruined big brick wall, not bricks like, bricks like that you build houses out of, stones. Maybe stones is more the word. Like when you see a giant stone wall or a giant stone castle or a stone cathedral where you have these big honkin' chunks, being able to make them a little bit more uniform would be nice for putting stuff like together. What monsters do we like to use in Warcry? I am working on some. So like I said, not technically a monster, but the guy in the thumbnail, technically considered a Chaos ally now. But the Ogroid Myrmidon, I'm definitely looking forward to finishing up and using. I definitely want to use a Chaos Gargant, because I have one built. He just needs to be painted. Actually, I have 2 built, now that I come to think of it. But only one has a base that's finished, texture-wise. Anyway. Terrorgeist. Big, weird, skeletal dragon thing. I bought a Terrorgeist on eBay a number of years back. And it showed up in, we'll say, disarray. It was not in great shape. It was on a rectangular base because it was more Warhammer Fantasy. Like somebody had bought it for Warhammer Fantasy and then not touched it for years. And then Age of Sigmar came along and then they were like, well, and they threw it on eBay. And then I bought it and took it off of the rectangular base, rebuilt it, put it on a round base, I think. I'm pretty sure it's on a round base. It's probably the wrong base, You're not, technically, like, there's an actual list now in Age of Sigmar about the bases you're supposed to use for specific models, but I don't really care. Because I'm not really playing Age of Sigmar, for one thing, and secondly, I'm like, this is close enough. So that's what I did, and I put him on a base. I might have sat down and tried to figure out exactly what base it was supposed to be. I don't remember. But he's on a round base. I've textured the base. There's all kinds of fun stuff going on in the base texture. I built a little scene as I do. And he's primed, like a bone color. So I've been thinking about working on him on Twitch as well, because that'd be sort of interesting. I haven't worked on any big characters on Twitch, so I might be doing that next, maybe even after the Skatari, when I get them done. I'll probably get them done not tomorrow, because I'll be on Twitch tomorrow night, at 7 p.m. Central Time, as I do. And then I'll also be on this becoming Friday at 10 a.m. Central as well. And I suspect that Friday at 10 a.m. Central is probably when the current Skatari will be done. Maybe not their bases. I generally paint the bases off air because it's frankly a little boring to watch. It's not, But also there's a lot of time when you like put wash on all the bases and then you have to wait an hour. So that's not good Twitch time. Anyway, so maybe I think I'm going to maybe do that. After I get done with the Skatari, I think I'm switching over to Terrorgeist. So that'll be interesting. And then, but that's a death monster technically, but it's still pretty cool, I think. And I have a death army because I have Night Haunts, which I also painted on Twitch, so I could do that. I was looking at Order, and Order's monsters, frankly, in my opinion, are kind of boring. So I was like, no, I don't see myself doing an Order monsters, even though I have Storm Bros finished and painted, also done on Twitch. Hello from the Philippines, working on my entry for Brushmasters. Anyone else here joining? I'm not familiar with Brushmasters. Is that a painting competition? That's kind of cool. Colin Max says squares and rectangles are the best bases. No, I don't think so. I prefer round bases all the time. Yeah, I'm a big fan of the round bases. Do not generally like square bases. Mom Gamer, no super chat. Would have loved to support you through that. Yeah, I don't really do the super chat. I don't know why. I haven't ever set it up, and it's partially the issue is that the way that YouTube handles super chat is that when you basically donate, I guess, through super chat and whatever, it makes kind of a big thing, and then there's stuff across the top, and I've watched videos from people before, recorded live streams from people before. I remember watching one from a guy who I follow on YouTube, and he talks a lot about how to grow your YouTube channel and stuff like that and everything, all that kind of stuff. And so I forget what the video was even about, but the headline, the title of the video, I'm like, oh, I want to know what he says about that. And it was a recording of a live stream, and during that live stream, it was a 45-minute live stream for him to basically answer one question, because the entire time he was constantly getting super chats and then like getting off track, like thanking that person and answering their questions, stuff like that, and he would get back on track, and then another one would happen. Now, admittedly, in 45 minutes, he made like $250. He's got, I don't know, 750,000 subscribers on YouTube, so he's a big deal. But nonetheless, I just have never kind of turned it on in that, because I didn't want to kind of go that way. But I appreciate it, though, Mom Gamer. I appreciate the whole situation there. So that's nice. Let's see here. Can we get gits next, please? I still have to build them, so probably not next, because I don't know that. I don't. The other thing too is I don't know that I have the right. Like, there's that box, but I think I need to make a decent list. I think I need something else, and I've been trying to figure out what that is. So I need to sit down and build a decent list. Now that I have the new books, I guess I can do that a little bit better, so that's helpful. But yeah, I do want to do them soonish. I really want to get into Warcry, but I have so much 40k stuff to get through first. Yeah, no, that makes sense. The new vampires and skeletons coming out have me looking at what I like from older fantasy undead. I grabbed a Lord Krell for my LGS that had been sitting there from before Age of Sigmar. Yeah, I've got one of those too. Painted, finally. I think mine was resin, if I remember though correctly. I bought it like on eBay, and it showed up, and it was like fine cast. And I was like, he did not say in the description that it was fine cast. It didn't say it was metal either, but yeah, I was a little bummed about that. But it worked out okay. Thank you, Adam, for your quick and easy skeleton painting tutorial. My girlfriend started to paint my skeletons yesterday. Nice. It's a fun process, and it doesn't take super long. But yeah, the skeletons do definitely work. Whatever you do, avoid pickle sand. It's got rock salt in it. Pickle sand. That's weird. I've never heard of that. Do you think I should get the new Blood Bowl rules, as I have the one from the old starter set? I don't know a ton about what they're calling the new season, second season, season 2. I don't know. I don't know what they're calling the new version, frankly, off the top of my head. I think it's season 2. But I also don't know a ton about the rules differences and such like that. So I don't know that would be... I don't have a good answer for that, unfortunately. I'm not the guy. I've always wanted a War Hydra, and Warcry is a great excuse to get one. I mean, yeah, that is a monster that you can use in there, and I think that's a monster for Order, I believe, the War Hydra. So yeah, if you dig that, that's cool. Let's see here. Hey, Nick Evans, how are you doing? I hear that the Kickstarter is working well for the new game. That's very cool. Let's see here. Hard to do rank and flank on circles. Would put my 40k on squares to annoy players. Yeah, see, I don't like rank and flank games. That's the part of the problem there too. I just don't enjoy moving everybody in a rectangle. You know what I mean? I just why I've always been a big fan of skirmish style games for the most part, and that kind of thing. So yeah, just a personal preference. What could they change in Age of Sigmar to make you want to play? I mean, there's nothing wrong with the game, certainly. It's just I'm not interested so much in playing army-style games anymore. I just don't like playing I like playing with smaller groups of models, and I also like not having to concern myself with them being in squads and coherency and stuff like that. One of the things I love about skirmish games, besides the fact that I can paint 5 or 10 miniatures, right, instead of having to paint, 50 or 60. The other thing I really enjoy is I don't have to move these guys as a squad. Playing a rank and flank game, like I was mentioning just a minute ago, where you're moving this rectangle of models, to me, I'm like, well, why did I bother to paint 10 of these guys if I basically move them all as one thing? Like, I don't dig it. At least with squad-style games, let's say something like 40K or Age of Sigmar, you're moving them, you have to stay in coherency, everyone's got to stay within a certain distance or whatever, but you can still kind of make the shape different depending upon the terrain. A little bit. You can stretch it out a little bit more, you can bunch it up a little bit more, you get those kind of options. But my main preference is that, like, this guy goes over here, and this guy goes over here, and this guy goes and hides behind this thing, and then they all shoot, or whatever the deal is. So that's why I like skirmish games personally. So it's not anything against Age of Sigmar, it's not anything against 40K. It's the style of game, generally, that I'm not as interested in. Now, I know with 40K, you've got Combat Patrol, which is the smallest version, basically, of 40K. You're playing with, I believe, 500-point armies, which, depending on the factions you play, can be as few. Like, it can be very few models, certainly. But still, you still got to keep them together in squad coherency, and I got to be honest, too, like, specifically with 40K, I don't mind it as much with Age of Sigmar, but with 40K, there's still that whole thing, we roll off at the beginning to see who gets to go first, and then we keep that turn sequence throughout the rest of the game. I prefer, like in Age of Sigmar, and in Kill Team, and in Warcry, and everything, where you're basically rolling off every turn to see who gets to go first during that turn, and the next turn it could be somebody else who gets to go first, or whatever, as opposed to it's set once and then that's the way it is the rest of the game. I just don't prefer that style either, so there's that. Blood Bowl Season 2 rules have changed enough that you will need the new rulebook. Biggest change of all is to passing, says Double Dip. Interesting. What are your favorite factions in Kill Team and 40K? That's a good question. I've always kind of been a fan of Chaos in 40K and Kill Team. Like, it's not necessarily a great Kill Team army, but I still like Chaos. They're just a lot of fun to paint and model and all that kind of stuff. Death Guard, well, that's still Chaos, but it's like a different flavor of Chaos. Death Guard's a hoot to paint. It really is. I really enjoy painting Death Guard. And they're pretty decent in Kill Team, so that's also a benefit. But yeah. Let's see here. So Kill Team is your jam. In comparison to, say, 40K, yeah, absolutely, definitely. Rank and file miniatures in Age of Sigmar are mostly very, very expensive hit point markers. Yeah, and that's the thing, too. Jack Fletcher says, "Good morning, Adam. I'm also a skirmish gamer." Yeah, well, that's good. It's just the type of game that I prefer to play these days. And another big benefit, besides just the actual gameplay, the thing I also really like about it, and I've talked about this a bunch of times, is it's kind of like a buffet. If you remember buffets from the before times, you can have a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of that. Same thing with playing skirmish games is that you can be like, I'm going to paint 12 Skatari. And then I'm done. And now I'm going to paint some Stormcast. And now I'm going to paint some whatever. And so being able to sit down and paint a little bit of something. Like, I would like to see I'd like to see a decent skirmish. If there's one out there, let me know. But like a decent skirmish alternate history World War II or alternate history World War I or something like that. All those games, Conflict 47, Dust, all those games have a tendency to be a little bit larger scale army size. Generally, but I would love to see like an alternate history World War II game, with like laser tanks and vampires or whatever, that kind of junk that you have in your alternate history type games that are like that. But I'd like to see that with like maybe 10 models, maybe 15 max, and that's your entire force. Conflict 47, your total army is generally as many as about 30-ish, roughly, plus usually some sort of vehicle, whether it's a walker or a tank, but I'd like to see something even a little smaller. You know what I mean? Because you're still moving guys in squads, and there's not something I'm interested in. Just picked up the Catacombs set for Christmas. It's loads of fun. Skirmish for the win. Nice. How can I convince people to play Kill Team? All my friends seem to love 2,000 point games at 40k. I mean, you kind of can't. Like, if it's a preference thing. If there's plenty of people out there who are like, why would I ever want to play with that few models? I want to play with 2,000 points of models, and that's great. That's what they do, and that's why they have the things that are out there. I would say Skirmish is obviously not as popular, but I would say it's getting more popular, so it may just be a time situation. But there are other people out there like us. We're not, dozens of us is what there are. But it's difficult to convince someone to do something they're not interested in doing. Like, there's been a lot of people in the chat over the last couple of weeks who are like, well, why don't you want to play 40k anymore? And I'm like, well, because here's the reasons why. And that's just the way it works. It depends on it depends on a lot of things, but that's kind of a big thing for this. How big is Dracula's America? That's Skirmish based, I believe. I know it's Skirmish based, but I don't know how big your warband is. Generally, I would say, I think less than 10, but I could be wrong. Malifaux and the other side, kind of alternate history. True, very true. The other side is a little bit more army-based, frankly. Malifaux is way more skirmish, but the other side is, because I own some other side stuff that I bought at Adepticon a couple of years ago, and one of the big benefits to it was I was like, oh, it's all pre-built, so that's really cool, and all you got to do is paint it. And then I got home and opened up the boxes and found out, oh, well, I mean, yeah, it was pre-built, but this robot's arm came off. This giant fishman, which is still an awesome model, is filled with giant gaps, like really big gaps in that model. They're not built well, unfortunately. They look awesome, but the other side models, specifically the big dogs, the big ones, I bought the big giant robot guy and the big giant fishman guy, and both of those models are screwed up in the box, and so it really just blew the wind out of my sails. Can you blow the wind out of your sails? Wouldn't that just make the sails get bigger? Well, anyway, it was a situation of like, oh, well, all right. So one of these days I want to try to fix, I think now that I've got Bondic, the stuff that I talked about in the TMA 2020s, I think I can probably fix those gaps better now in the big giant fishman, because he's a big giant fishman. I'm not made of wood. Of course I'm going to be like, yeah, I want a big giant fishman. That's awesome. But when he's got giant gaps, like where his arms were glued on and stuff like that, like really, I mean, 1/16 of an inch gaps, if not bigger, So but it was one of those deals where you buy the box and you're like, okay, cool, but there's not like a window. And if there would have been a window, I'd have been like, this one's not. I'm not buying that one. And they would have been like, oh, let me get you one that, oh, these are all like that. And like I said, the robot, when I opened up the box, like one of his legs or arms was just off. So I'm like, well, I'm going to have to fix that. And it doesn't look like it was like I'm going to have to pin it, even though he's a plastic model. Anyway, so a little bummed about the other side. But again, like I said, it's a little bit more army game. It's like a rank and flank a little bit, except you're not moving on rectangles, you're moving on circles. Like you have these circular bases, and then you put like 3 dudes in there, and then you move. It's a little weird, but I was interested, but then, like I said, a lot of the models were not awesome. David Moffat says, I like rank and flank, and I like skirmish, but I'm not so much on large sci-fi battles. Well, there you go. See, everyone's got their interest areas, People's tastes change with fashion, says Sundered Psyche. 2 years back, I really wanted to advocate low point cost games of 40k, and no one at my LGS was interested, and now they all play Combat Patrol. Go figure. I mean, we used to play way back in the day when I first started in 5th. I got into playing 40k by playing Combat Patrol, which back then was not an official GW thing. It was a thing that just basically a bunch of people kind of decided about online. And it was 400 points, and there were very specific rules, like you couldn't take anything that had more than 2 wounds, and you couldn't take a vehicle that had more than this much armor, and there was all these different rules. So you would build your lists within that 400 points following those rules and everything like that, and you're like, okay, cool. Well, they've now done this, and it makes sense. It makes a total amount of sense for Games Workshop to be like, we want to push the concept of playing Combat Patrol, because if you build a 500-point army, and buy the book and all that stuff, eventually it's going to become a 1,000-point army, and then eventually it's going to become a 1,500-point army, and so on. So again, it's just another good entrance vector if you're into that. If you tell somebody, hey, you're interested in 40K, you don't like Skirmish, you want to play an army game, but almost everybody in your area only plays just straight up 2,000 point. That's a big hill to climb as a beginner. But if you're like, look, you can start by playing 500 point games, and here's the rules for it, and here we're pushing it, and we're telling you about it. We're even selling boxes now that are just called Combat Patrol. You can just buy this one box and be, boom, done, started on getting a 2,000 point army. That, from a business sense, it makes total sense. And, well, even from a hobby sense, if you're interested in getting into the hobby, making it easier for you to get into the hobby just makes it easier for you to get in the hobby. I mean, you know. Saw a cool podcast last night from Guerrilla Miniatures with some of our favorite designers from games like Castlands, Frostgrave. We're like, oh yeah, that was for Blaster, the magazine that they've been doing. It's Ash from Guerrilla Miniature Games and the games that he's been writing for Osprey, like Gamma Wolves, Last Days, etc. It's Joe McCullough from Frostgrave / Ranges of Shadow Deep / Oathmark / etc. Joe McGuire, who is to TNT. What the heck does that stand for? This is not a test. And he also did Reality's Edge for Osprey. And then Sean Sutter from Relic Blade. And there's some other people in there too. Mike Hutchinson? I'm thinking from Gaslands. But anyway, they've been making this magazine called Blaster that you can buy that has, from what I understand, at least the first issue, and I haven't seen the second issue, but I've looked through the first issue on PDF, I think. It's predominantly add-ons to the games that they've already written, which, as a concept, is cool, but only if you play all the different games. Initially, when they first announced it, I thought they were going to make, like, little one-off games. You got all these, like, relatively well-known designers who were going to make these little one-off little games, and you would buy this thing, and then you'd be like, sweet, now I have, like, 4 or 5 different little one-off kind of fun games. But as it turned out, they were all expansions for the game that they've already written. So, like, let's say you play Last Days from Ash. That's cool, but you don't play any other stuff. If you buy this magazine, you now have expansions for games you don't play, and then one expansion for a game that you do. So you either hopefully play a bunch of those games to make it more worth your while to buy the magazine, or maybe you're like, well, at least I have an expansion for Gaslands now. I guess I should get Gaslands, or what? I don't know. It was. I would have done it slightly different, but that's not to say that it's unsuccessful or anything like that. From what I understand, it's selling pretty well, and they've done a second one and are probably going to do a third one. I love the concept in general, but like I said, I was hoping that it was going to be like one-off content from them, and I think maybe in the second one there's a couple of little one-off kind of games in there, but yeah, I just love the concept of, you know, those folks getting together and doing something. So that's very cool. But if you look up Blaster online, I don't know if just typing in Blaster into Google is going to do you any good. Might get you Master Blaster from Thunderdome, Mad Max. So I don't, but you'll probably find it. I like Age of Sigmar, and my friend likes D&D. Do you think that the Soulbound RPG would be a good game to play? I mean, yeah, if you're interested in RPGs and also Age of Sigmar, then probably Soulbound is the way to go. I've heard good things about it. I know Vince likes it. So yeah. Let's see here. Chain of Command is a popular platoon level. World War II platoons are a bit too large for Skirmish. That's true. Hey, Gaddis Gaming, how you doing? Yes, Mike Hutchinson was in the podcast. Nice. I think Joseph McCullough made a one-off in the second Blaster. Like I said, I thought I heard that was the case. I thought something like that happened. Mystic Skies, one-off game by Mike and Sean. Nice, yeah. Blaster is pretty neat. Issue 2 does have a self-contained game based off Relic Blades and Gaslands. Nice. Do you think that at some point GW will make the switch to STL files instead of selling physical miniatures? No. Well, I mean, maybe in the far-flung future, but probably not anytime soon. No, I don't know that they will ever want to go down that road. Again, maybe if there was in the far-flung future a machine that could print quality that was as high as the stuff that we get from GW these days, and also was proprietary, where you had to buy the resin from them and you had to buy the files from them and you couldn't use other files, and then maybe. But otherwise, no. Like, I own a decent amount of resin printed models, and they are great, but they're still not GW great. Like, the sharpness and the detail to GW models is difficult for other companies to get at, even when using the same processes. If you're going to do injection molded plastic into steel molds, GW's models are still sharper than almost every other company out there, and it's not like they have super magical technology. It's just they are willing to invest more money to make those molds work better. I kind of explained it on Twitch recently. So, like, you've got a figure here, okay? So here's a dude from, this is I don't know, some sort of corn Age of Sigmar dude, right? So he's got very sharp details. His knee pads are very pointy. If I'm holding him very tightly to try to paint him, he will be poking me. Now, if you think of the inside of the mold has to be the opposite of that. So to get the mold to come to such a tiny little point for the little knee pad spike that it's so sharp that it will poke you, they have to actually grind out the inside of that mold, because resin and metal molds are made with a fluid that they pour over a master sculpt, and then it flows around it, usually like a galvanized rubber or something like that, and it flows around it, and then they take it apart. Like, they cut it apart in two pieces. Now you have this two-piece mold, and you put it into a machine. It's called a spin caster, and it spins it around, and then you pour in the resin or the lead or whatever, not lead, but the metal. And the centrifugal force spritz it, and then it fills the mold, and that's the way it works. That's the way that those two types of materials are made. Injection molded plastic, it's just what it says on the tin. The plastic is melted very, very hot, and then is injected into this steel mold. Well, you can't make the steel mold by taking a master shape and then pouring molten steel around it. That won't work. That will destroy the master, and nothing good will come of it. So what they do to make injection molded plastic, from the way it's been explained to me, is they actually take the two pieces or multiple pieces of the mold and they grind it out like a little robot arm, almost kind of grinds out all the bits. Think of the size of the bit that has to be able to get into the absolute sharpest, tiniest little points on all the models. They're little tiny little bits. They're super expensive. They break frequently, so you have to go through a lot of them, which is why a company can make an injection molded plastic thing, and that mold might cost them $5,000. And something that is roughly the same size but has much, much, much higher detail can cost 5 times that much to make the mold. So in that situation, even a resin printed model, though they are great looking, they're almost never that sharp. And I'm saying almost never because there are admittedly $5,000 and $10,000 and $20,000 resin printers out there. But your normal $500 or less home printer does great work, but it is not as incredibly sharp and almost pointy. You know what I mean? Like, ow, I'm holding. Like, I painted 3 of those Varangard, those big knights on horses for Age of Sigmar, and at the time I didn't have the handles yet, and they're so big that it's just hard to. It was hard to use putty, poster putty to stick them onto a pill bottle. So I would just hold them in my hand while I was painting them, and they're covered in spikes. And I was just constantly, there'd be times when especially when I was gluing the pieces together, where you're just like holding, you're like, I hope I don't bleed. This hurts a lot. And it's just, they're very pointy, is my point. So all that being said, I don't see GW dropping a whole bunch of STL files on us anytime soon. There's a potential down the road they might release potentially something and just be like, hey, here's some STL files to be extra little doodads that you might put onto terrain that you might build, little symbols like, the symbol for the Slaves of Darkness or the symbol for Tau or something like that. They could do that in the future, but I think that in general they would prefer to just ignore 3D printing altogether. And, that's a choice. But they're a model company. That's the way they make their money. They make a decent amount of money off of books, Lord knows, because they sell, in general, kind of a lot of them. It is majority models is what they're selling. So yeah, I don't see the STL thing coming from them anytime soon. Tyranids are also very pointy. That's true. Archon Studios actually has a video of them cutting one of the molds for Dungeons and Dragons, or sorry, Dungeons and Lasers 2 on the Kickstarter. Yeah, metal molds are expensive because it is a heck of a process. Resin and metal models are way easier because it is literally you're pouring resin, or not resin, sorry, you're pouring like galvanized rubber, I think is what they call it, into over an actual physical copy of the thing, and then you're cutting the mold apart. It's a whole thing. Or sometimes what they're doing is they're putting a model into like a thing, they're pouring it up to a certain point, and then they let that dry, and then they pour the second part of it, and then it's easier to pull apart, or whatever. 5K is the cheapest of the cheap for a sprue style mode for injection. Yeah, for steel. Yeah, and I've heard that. I've heard a lot of the models that GW are doing, like a lot of the molds in the GW range are between $25,000 and $500. Sorry, between $25,000 and $50,000 to produce. So, like, that's a ton of money, right? And then you have to crank out, obviously. Now, the actual, every time you squirt plastic into that mold, like, each of those things is cheap. Like, when you make, like, the amount of money that goes into, let's say, the Rhino kit, which is a mold that they've been using for years and years and years, it's pennies to produce, but they have to get back the money that they spent originally, because it's not just $50,000, for a Rhino. We're talking about each of those sprues. If there's enough detail, they can be incredibly expensive. So there's a bunch of upfront money, plus all the design and all that stuff and blah, blah, blah. That takes a long time, too. From what I've been told, GW spends 2 years on every model. Like, they'll do it, and then and they do 3D print. They do it in-house, I believe, just to be like, so they could have, like, a copy that's close, that they can look at and go, eh. And from what I've been told, they will like produce a model, and then it like sits in the studio, and then they look at it, and people come by and go, and they think about it, and it's just not something they just like do and crank out and get it out the door. It's something like every model that we see, like those skeletons that just popped up that are going to be in Cursed Cities, or Cursed City, the expansion, the Warhammer Quest thing that's coming out soon. From what I've been told, models like that, they produced that 2 years ago. Not produced, it's not in plastic, but they started the design of that up to 2 years ago. So they spend a bunch of time. But yeah. Voce Noctum says, gotta suffer for your art. Oh yeah, no, I mean, just poking myself with X-Acto blades, I've done plenty of that too, but then there's also a lot of very pointy, especially when you play Chaos. If you play Tau, not nearly as pointy. But yeah, Tyranids, Chaos, Dark Eldar, very pointy as well. Yeah, definitely. Do you know a good way to cheaply convert AOS Khorne mortals? No. Like, I don't know what you'd want to convert them to or from or with. But yeah, no, I'm trying to think of like the Khorne mortals. Like, I'm familiar vaguely with the models. You're talking about like the ones that came in the original starter box for the original Age of Sigmar, probably, where there was like when the Stormcast first came out, and there was also those dudes. Well, like this guy is basically a Khorne mortal. He's a slaughter priest or something like that, I think. But yeah. Plenty of amazing STLs out there from third-party sculptors anyway, in my opinion. Great for variety in your force and supporting content creators. Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I've got actually some 3D prints coming from Nerd House Minis soon for a project. And I've got some other 3D printed stuff that my friend Matt from Game4 is printing for me in the next coming week or weeks, and that I'm also going to be working on as well. So yeah, I enjoy that stuff. I have not yet, like I said, pulled the trigger and got myself a resin printer, but partially it's because partially because I know people who've got them who are happy to do that. Like if you're looking for getting STLs printed, my friend Matt from Game4 has a website that's called Gaming Matter, but it's spelled MATTR because his name is Matt Ridley, so Matt R. So gamingmatr.com, and he has like a quote page or whatever, and you could say, hey, I want to get this printed, and what do you think the costs are, and all that kind of stuff, and whatever. And he prints stuff. He's been printing stuff for Irregulars in the past, and does good work and ships out and everything like that. So There's other companies and there's other people who are doing that as well. But if you've got a friend who's got a resin printer, very frequently you can be like, hey, I want to get this printed. How much do I need to pay you? And then that's a good way. And it's if you're getting some things printed, and let's say you're paying $10 for this and $5 for this and a whole bunch of this stuff, and maybe it's $25, that's still cheaper than even the $200 that like an entry-level resin printer is. So, and you're helping your friend out because now they feel like they got this printer. Very frequently you're like, I need to print stuff now because I bought this printer. And so when you come to them and give them money, it's like it's like a business now all of a sudden. So, that's cool. Yeah, the first model costs $50,000. The second model costs 25 cents. That's kind of the way it works. Yeah. So you mean they started those cowhorn elves 2 years ago and still thought it was good? I mean, again, they're very, very well done sculpts. Like specifically for the Lumineth, there's that one model that is just like an empty set of armor. That's a spectacularly well done model. That's very, very cool. Aesthetically, I'm not super into cow elves, but there are plenty of people who are like, that is for me. Please let me buy all of those things. I've talked to people who are very interested in it. So there's that. Corpse grinders would make good corn mortals. Yeah, I could see using those models from Warcry, the corpse grinders. Greetings from Tinley Park. It's so cold I saw Han Solo on a tauntaun outside my window. Out by the first mile marker? I'll see you in hell. Welcome though. Let's see here. Design process I've heard is potentially 4 years ahead. Yeah, I mean they do. It's a lot of planning, and which is why I remember people saying, well, they should have just held off on 9th edition, right, versus trying to launch it during the middle of a pandemic. Well, I don't know that they can. Like when you get to be a company that big, you're not particularly agile. You hope to be in certain situations, but sometimes you're like, we have to do this because things are already on boats, things are already in warehouses. I mean, there's just, that's kind of the way it works. Gaddis Gaming, how you doing, Lee? Says, Matt is awesome. Yes, Matt is awesome. That's true. I'm open to doing 3D prints for Aussie irregulars at a reasonable price, says VJ Morph. So if you're an irregular, hit him up in the Discord. But yeah, that's the thing too, is that the benefit is that you can, like, anybody can print you stuff, but if they're on the other side of the planet, then shipping becomes an issue. But if you're relatively close and you've got somebody, like, I don't have to pay shipping with Matt because I will pick it up from him. Normally he would just bring it to work, but we're all working from home right now. So then we can't do that. So we'll just figure something else out. Have you seen the Dungeon Delvers Kickstarter that just finished? I love all those models. Just can't wait to paint them. I've not heard of Dungeon Delvers, no. To me, Lumineth looks like Rackham design gone wrong. Rackham, like Confrontation and stuff like that. I know a lot of painters love the Rackham stuff, but again, I got to say, like, the aesthetic was not my aesthetic. But I can see where you'd make the link between those two. You're right. There is some definite, like, they kind of look a bit alike. So yeah. The new GW models that use negative space really are a modern sculpting marvel, so nicely done. Yeah, there's been a couple of them. Specifically, like I said, that Lumineth with the empty armor is really, really well done. The Night Haunts, you got a lot of Night Haunts who are basically hollow on the inside, and they're just like touching the base with like one little kind of tendril from their weird little cloak. I mean, in some situations, it makes them a bit wiggly when you're trying to paint them. If you've watched on Twitch, when I've been trying to work on the Night Haunts, there was a couple, specifically the Spirit Torment. Like, you'd hold that guy, and if you just moved your hand just like a little bit, he would just be like, and wiggle around like a bobblehead. But in general, those are very, very cool. Hot tip, don't use guitar string offcuts for your tiny tank antennas. They are needle sharp. That is true. And will puncture your fingertips when you try to pick them up, bloodying your tanks. Yeah, no, I've heard people in the past be like, oh yeah, no, guitar strings make great, like, cables or anything like that, especially like the thicker strings, because they're wrapped, with the kind of, and they make a great cable from, like, attaching your power fist to your armpit or whatever. I don't know. And they're cool, but they are hard to work with. It's hard to cut guitar strings sometimes, unless you have maybe like a special tool for it. But yeah, but the real skinny ones, they will poke you like right in your finger, which is no good. Do you know if you can use minis for the Soulbound RPG? I mean, you can or you can't. It's one of those situations like I think you don't have to, but I don't know. Actually, I don't know jack about that. I've watched people play Soulbound a little bit on Twitch, but I don't think they were playing with miniatures, so I guess you don't have to. But I suppose you could. Just like back in the day when you played D&D. Like when I played D&D, we never used miniatures, but I also talked to people in the same era who use miniatures all the time. So, it's kind of... I know in like 4th edition D&D, miniatures were almost kind of required because the combat became very oriented on the actual tabletop and stuff like that. And I think 5th has still got a bit of that. Or at least it's slightly easier that way. But when I first started playing D&D in the 5th grade... we would just be like, okay, well, he's about this far away from you, so you need to roll this, that kind of thing. It was generally kept relatively miniature-free. I like Lumineth, fight me. I won't fight you. I mean, I'm glad that you do. Here's the thing. I like the fact, again, there are times when you see a model, and you're just like, that is poorly done. That is not good. And it has nothing to do with the aesthetics. It has more to do with maybe it's very soft detail, or it's hard to tell. Is that a belt? Is that a fold in his shirt? What is that? Is that a goiter? I don't even know what the heck that thing is that I'm looking at on this model. So there are bad models. But then there are models that are well done, very technically done, very sharp detail, lots of things. You can definitely tell that this is the cow part of the elf and this is the elf part of the elf or whatever. But you may look at it and go, that is not attractive to me as a model. I don't like the look of it, but it's well done. And that's the thing, is that like most big companies these days are producing, because they're producing so much on the computer, there's so much detail and it looks really good. But you can put something out and be like, I don't like the looks of that. It's well done. It's a good model. It's not my aesthetic choice. So the fact that some people do dig Lumineth and other people don't, I think that's great. It's just like chocolate or like ice cream. Some people like vanilla ice cream. Sometimes like some people like chocolate ice cream. They're both right. So yeah. Sharp guitar strings might work well for Blood Angels then. I hadn't thought of that. That's a good point. If you do Lumineth with a helmet swap, they look way better. 4th edition D&D is a fun co-op skirmish game. I've heard from people who'd played it, because I never played 4th edition D&D, but I'd heard from people who played 4th edition D&D that it was like the world's greatest skirmish miniatures game, or the world's densest, maybe is the better term, because there was a lot about that. Please tell us about 1st edition D&D, Adam. I don't know that I played 1st edition. Like, I've got a friend who is a touch older than me, and he has, like, original D&D. Like, when they came in little 5.5 by 8, it's basically like an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, folded in half. So, and it was saddle stitched, which means it had staples. So it didn't even have like a perfect bound. Like this type of book here is called perfect bound. Okay, it's a soft cover, but the edge is flat and it's been glued in there. A comic book, let's say, okay, is saddle stitched, which means it has staples here and here, and it's just been folded. There's your printing lesson for the day. Anyway, the original D&D was, like I said, like 5 by 8 roughly, and it was saddle stitched, and it had a cardstock cover, and it was not in color at all. And I've got a friend who still owns his copies from like 1975 or something like that. When I got into D&D in 5th grade, it was in the box set that was red, I think, if I remember correctly. And it was still saddle-stitched books, but they had color covers, and they were like 8.5 by 11-ish, roughly, and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah. But that was a long time ago. I sometimes wish GW models had a little less detail. I like a lot of detail. I do. I strip out the copper wire from old power cables and use that for hobbying. A standard short cable gives you more flexible wire than you'd use in a year of kit bashing. Oh, that's true. I've taken the wire, I guess, that you use for... They make this wire for hanging pictures, and it is a not braided, but it's just like coiled, whatever. Anyway, it's a wrapped wire. And so if you just take it and you just twist it the other direction, you get a bunch of really super thin wires, which will also poke you in the finger, so watch out for that. But it's a much better scale, like if you're trying to like maybe like put like a cable around somebody's arm, like if you're trying to like I've used it before to like wrap around someone's arm to make it look like they've got like some sort of piece of jewelry or something like that, and it works out pretty well. There's that. Hey, Genuine Vision, how you doing? Relating models to ice cream is strangely accurate. Both are unnecessary and yet fully necessary and come with a wide range of flavors. That's it's true. It's very true. Thanks for these streams. I got into Warcry because of you. Sigh. Well, sorry. Now I'm looking for bear heads for Stormcast. Suggestions other than eBay. Well, I mean, technically, I think if you look on the Forge World site, they have bear heads for Stormcast. I'm 98% sure. They're made out of resin, of course, because it's Forge World. But you could look there. I know that there's a company that I've bought bear heads from that were called Statuesque Miniatures. That's a possibility. And then there's also, and they're in the UK, I'm 98% sure. And then also in the UK is a company called Anvil Industries that I've bought a lot of heads from. But you could also look at more from Poland. There's plenty of companies out there that do a lot of resin stuff. Puppets War, Cromlech. I don't know if Max Mini came back online or not. I know that they had gone out of business a bit, sort of, and then somebody kind of bought it and brought it back, but I'm not sure. But yeah, there's definitely companies out there that do that kind of stuff. Resin printers are like ferrets. Great items for friends to own. Oh, okay, well, I mean, there you go. Death Guard ice cream would kill you. That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that. Have you thought about playing Aliens Another Glorious Day in the Core? I haven't. I know that on YouTube, who was talking about it recently? Esoteric Order of Gamers. He is in New Zealand, and he's been, I think, painting a bunch of the miniatures for it and things like that, but I don't know a ton about it, so I've been interested in just maybe checking it out a bit. The Necromunda head packs from Forge World are pretty great. Yeah, I mean, I've got a Forge World head pack somewhere where it was for Stormcast, just for women heads to put on the Stormcast to make them ladies. And I bought one of those at a convention that Forge World was at. It might have been Las Vegas Open 2020. Anyway, last convention I was at, actually. But yeah, and I also bought some. I think I bought some Vansar weapons, maybe, from that same. Yeah, but there's a bunch of like I've still never yet put together a Forge World vehicle or anything big monster, big vehicle, anything like that. But I have bought bits from Forge World in the past. Generally, I do it at conventions because then it saves you on shipping, so there's a benefit to that. But yeah. Oh, Spellcrow! I forgot about Spellcrow too. Yep. They're also a good company for finding bits like that too. Why is Forge World separate from Games Workshop? I don't know. It's some sort of business decision, I'm assuming. Let's see here. Max Mini got bought up by Troll Trader, but currently Troll Trader have suspended resin production due to COVID issues. Makes sense. Hopefully they'll start up again soon. Gotcha. I knew they got bought by somebody. Do you think Battlefleet Gothic back? I mean, they made a video game version of it, so I don't know that they're gonna. I don't know. I know there's a vocal minority of people out there, it seems, who are very interested in bringing that back. I just don't know if the GW would. It seems like it's a lot of. I don't know. Maybe they might make a box game eventually where they release it, but I don't know that it would have the support long term that the original Battlefleet Gothic did, at least until it stopped. But yeah, it's a possibility, I guess. What are your hopes for AOS 3.0, and will it hit this year? I don't have any hopes for it, particularly, because I don't really play a ton, so I'm not really a good person to answer that. Probably Vince and Tom over at Warhammer Weekly on Wednesdays on YouTube would be a good place to check that out. They've got, I'm sure, very, very good answers to that. Whether it will hit this year, potentially. And actually, Vince and I did have a conversation about this. And it's kind of a business decision sort of a situation. So, and I think this is not off too far off the mark. So last year, 2020, GW released 9th edition 40K, and it sold crazy, just totally nutso, right? Indominus sold like zillions and zillions of copies, all that stuff. So they made, I think the technical term is a metric buttload of money last year, Games Workshop did. Now, the thing about capitalism is that you're only as good as your last success, which means you have to constantly be making more money. Otherwise, because they're a publicly traded company, then if you don't try to make as much money as possible at all times, you are a bad person. Just, the way it works. So, since they made so much money last year, even in the middle of a pandemic, which doesn't matter to the people who hold the stocks, I have a suspicion that they're going to try to make, because they kind of have to, they sort of have to try to make as much money. Like the concept that the economy or anything like that should be infinitely, constantly raising is stupid. It's just the way it works. The only people who believe in infinite growth, there's a famous quote out there, are something about the only people who believe in infinite growth are the insane and economists. So anyway, long story short is that if they need to try to figure out how to make as much money this year as they made last year, the very good possibility is they would release both Kill Team 2nd Edition and Age of Sigmar 3rd Edition in this year, because then both of those things would sell and it would hopefully equal or surpass what they made last year. That's just a guess on my part. Like I said, had a conversation a little bit with Vince, who's considerably smarter than me about that kind of stuff. And I think that it's true. They're a very good possibility. Also, they've been following a 3-year kind of cycle recently. So this year, 2021, would be 3 years since both AOS 2.0 and Kill Team 1.0. So there's a possibility that that's the case. Do you think Games Workshop will switch to alternating activation system? I mean, they already have in Age of Sigmar, Kill Team, and Warcry. Now, if you're asking whether 40K will, that's a different story. Uncle Adam, my son says hi. Well, hello to you as well. If Mantic don't do a spaceship combat game and call it Starmada, I will be very upset. I mean, that's a pretty good idea. They should do that, I think. My GW stores say you can use Forge World. I know Citadel owns it now. Yeah, they're like a subsidiary, I believe, but I don't know why they're a subsidiary and not the same company. Again, maybe it's a legal thing. Who knows? Just got myself an Ogroid Myrmidon after being massively inspired by Trovarian's masterclass. Nice. It's going to be a learning week. Yeah, he's a big model. I mean, it's not huge, but he's a decent size, and I've been enjoying painting him. But I like sort of hit a stopping point, and I'm like, well, and then like I said yesterday, I started painting the Harbinger of Decay, who had been sitting on my desk, primed and zenithal highlighted for probably 2 years. And so all of a sudden finally just was like, oh yeah, I think I should do that. And then I cranked through it and almost finished him yesterday. Hi, just recently found your channel. Have been binge watching all your past content during working and hobby time. Thanks for your hard work. Well, thank you, Bearded Lynx. I appreciate it. I'm glad you found the channel. Any new hobbies you picked up during COVID that are not miniatures related? No, I guess. Not really. I keep thinking about trying to learn some sort of music, but I haven't done that particularly. Like, we own a piano. Like, it came with the house. We bought the house from my wife's grandmother. And so it came with a piano. So I could learn. Like, there are plenty of apps for your iPad where you can, like, they'll teach you how to play the piano and stuff like that. And I've thought about that. Though, at least one of the cats gets very frightened when you play the piano. He does not like it. So I don't know if I want to do that particularly. If I could get, like, an electric piano with the headphones, maybe that'd be a different story. But then that's a whole other add-on. I have a small, tiny guitar, which is behind me. And I haven't really figured out how to play it yet. It's called a cigar box guitar. kind of out of tune as well. But I've been messing with that a little bit, also to the chagrin of several of the cats. Different cat. Margot doesn't like the guitar, and Carlson doesn't like the piano. So, I don't know. Kind of stuck with that. But haven't... yeah, other than that, not really so much. I've been just basically painting a lot and streaming. I don't know, I guess streaming is kind of... It's a little bit like a hobby, and it's something new that I've learned during COVID, so maybe that's the right answer there. Let's see here. Hello from Nottinghamshire. How you doing? I believe you've mentioned Planet 28 Skirmish Sci-Fi before. Did you see the creator has a Kickstarter for a fantasy skirmish game based on P28? It's called Brutal Quest. I could not remember the name, but yes, actually I mentioned it earlier because he was here in the chat. I don't know if he still is, but yeah, Nick Evans was here in the chat before. And yeah, so it's based off the same type of rule set, right, for Planet 28, and it's called Brutal Quest. I knew it was Brutal something. But yeah, and they've hit their goal, so that's congratulations for that. But yeah, it's again very like it's one of those kind of small skirmish, and it's fantasy based as opposed to where Planet 28 was more sci-fi. So yeah, if you're interested in that kind of thing, you should take a look at it. It's very cool. A Billion Suns by Mike Hutchinson is released in 11 days. Looking forward to it. I'm not familiar with what that is. If you are a cat person, that makes you 10 out of 10 as a person, just saying. Well, I appreciate that, Blue Fang. We have 4 cats. We've got 2 sisters, Margot, who sometimes shows up on chat because she tries to jump up on the table, so then I have to pick her up and show her. But she's always like hanging down. She doesn't want to like look at the camera. I don't know. She's not into that. And then we've got a sister. Her sister's name is Maggie. She's kind of chunky, but it's okay. We still love her. And then there's Diesel, who was sleeping over there, but I don't know where he went. He's our oldest boy. He's 15. And then there's Carlson, who is a black and white like tuxedo cat, and he is a scaredy cat. Like we got all of them from the shelter, but he's a special boy. He's very scared of a lot of different things and stuff. So we're constantly trying to not scare him and stuff like that. So yeah, I have an electric kazoo, says moderator Matt. I don't have an electric kazoo. I have a regular kazoo, like a metal one that I bought online. And I also have some weird instrument that's like, it's like a tube, and then it has a piece of like the material that drum heads are made out of on one end of it, and then coming out of that on that end is a very tightly coiled spring that's maybe 2 feet long. And then when you hold on to the tube and you sort of wiggle the string or whatever, it makes like weird, crazy noises and stuff like that. So that'd be a lot of fun. Totally sounded like Nirvana. Exactly. I'm sure that they did play a lot of cigar box guitars. The thing that's really fun about this guitar, though, if I can get it in the shot, which I can't really, is that, so it's electric, like I can plug it in, but it has two different types of pickups. It has internally what's called a piezo pickup, which is what most acoustic guitars have, and they just pick up the acoustic sound in the inside here. But then it also has an electric pickup here, like a normal electric guitar. And so depending on how you turn these things, you can make it sound like just amplified acoustic, or run it through an amplifier and tweak it and do all kinds of stuff and make it sound almost like a crazy metal guitar, except with only 3 strings. So, it's sort of fun. I do have a tiny little amp, too, that I've also used with it. Let's see. Do you currently play Warcry? And if not, why so? I do. I've been... Let's see. How many Warcry bands do I have painted now? Nighthaunt, Stormcast, Nurgle, Rotbringers. I swear there's a 4th. Isn't there a 4th? Maybe there's only those 3. I'm trying to picture in my head. There's got to be another one. But yeah, and then I'm also going to be working on Gloomspite Gits eventually. I got those guys. I also have Corvus Cabal, like half built, and then I screwed up the bases on several of them because I did not realize that there were both 25 and 28 millimeter bases in that package, and so I got to ungoof up that. And yeah, but no, I do like it. And Agroid Myrmidon, which is in the thumbnail today, and is in the process of being painted. He's halfway, maybe not quite halfway there. Living on a prayer. Thunder Tube, yes, that is a Thunder Tube. I'm also being told that it's called a Thingamabob, but I think the one that I own is called a Thunder Tube. It's fun. I'm a vet tech and only have one cat because, I'm sharing my house with my SO. If it was up to my wife, we would have all the cats. We would have a lot of cats. I don't know. His name is Pike, named after a murderous pirate. It fits him. Nice. If guitars and pianos are out, then that just leaves bagpipes and accordions. I think those are both really hard to learn. Specifically bagpipes. Hello from Sarawak. I've never heard that. How is your basement? Ready for miniature? It is it's still in the process. I am considering, and I've been talking about this a little bit, I'm considering and planning kind of to hopefully move out of the studio where I do my normal Friday videos. It's up above a place downtown, up above a store, which is why you very frequently hear road noise, because it's downtown. And the place is not as well insulated as I kind of thought. And I'm thinking about bringing all that stuff back there and like no longer renting the studio, which will save a little bit of money as well. And basically kind of building myself a little studio in the basement because it's generally quieter here than it is downtown. There are still once in a while you'll get a fire truck or something like that, but it's generally quieter. Oh yeah, Skaven. Good, thank you. Yes, Skaven. That's right. I've got also the 13. 13 plague monks. Well, 12 of them have the pointy sword and the woe staff, and then one guy's got the pointy sword in the book, which I assume he found. But yeah. Shaven Skaven. Ooh. I married the daughter of Lithuanian immigrants. If I couldn't handle accordion music, I would have been sunk. That's true. I could understand that. That makes a lot of sense. My wife is a cello player. That's Nick right there. That's her cello case. But also plays piano as well. So take up the theremin. Actually, we have a theremin. Now that I can think of it, it's not a fancy theremin. It was actually built from a kit from a friend of ours who's good with electronics, and he gave it to my wife for her birthday years ago. But like the theremin, if you've ever seen one, there's the type that have one antenna and the type that have two antennas. And usually the two antenna ones, they're a little bit more expensive, but they give you the ability. One of the antennas is for pitch, so you get your hand near this antenna, and then how close you get to it is like it gets higher, and then the pitch gets lower. And then the other antenna that you use your hand is more for volume. So the closer you get to it, the louder it gets, and the farther away you get from it, the quieter it gets. The one that we have over there in the music, in the sunroom, it's just the one antenna kind. So the volume stays the same all the time, but it's the pitch depending on how close you get to it. But yeah, we also have another instrument called a kumbas, which I think is a Turkish instrument. Kind of looks like a cross between a metal banjo and a ukulele. So it's like a metal banjo, but smaller. And when I say metal, I mean all metal. Like it doesn't, like normal banjos are metal around the edge, but they have kind of almost like a drum head sort of like face to them. This is metal all the way around and metal on the front. But it's real small. It's like I said, it's like a ukulele, but it's, anyway. Got it at, where do we get it? Renaissance Festival, strangely enough. Yeah. Yes, the 13 CVS receipt, Skaven. That's right. They do have that very long kind of parchment hanging down off their woe stabs, and it does look like a CVS receipt. Cats get zoomies and sound like horses in the basement ceiling upstairs floor. That's true. That will be one sound that I would not have normally at the studio, is that once in a while, the cats will all of a sudden decide to make a bit of a racetrack move, and you can hear that in the basement, but it's not too bad. Cello case is Nick's day job. That's true. With GW bringing back the old world, do you think Mordheim might get a triumphant return? I actually made a video about that, 2-3 months ago? Something like that, about Mordheim. I kind of hope so. I would like to see it, but it's hard to say. Future is still unclear on that one. If you've got the space and the resources, Basement Studio can be amazing. Right now, not the space, because the basement is filled with crap. So as I get that crap out over the course, here's the thing. I don't want to even start to move stuff from the studio back home until spring, because I don't want to move when it's -14 outside or snowing or slushy or anything like that. I want to wait till moving in the winter is a real pain in the butt. So I'm thinking this is more of a spring thing, but I have to clean up the basement and get the area for stuff to be able to come in ready to go between now and then. So I'm slowly working on that, and hopefully we'll get it figured out. Let's see here. There's a company in Calgary making home offices out of sea boxes. I'm not sure if they're studio material, but it seems tempting. Sea boxes. What the heck is a sea box? Is it like a shipping container? I think we call them shipping containers. Maybe they're like the big metal things, and you see them on trains sometimes, and they sit on the giant boats and come across the ocean. If that's a sea box, then yeah, we've got a company, at least one company I can think of here in Wisconsin that does that, because previous job I worked for this company, and they used to have this huge event outdoors, this huge week-long event, and they would have like kind of almost like a trade area, kind of like if you go to like Gen Con or any kind of convention area, you got the dealer area, and then this is just like massive outdoors dealer area, and a lot of the dealers are selling airplanes. So it was, but there was a company that would come there that would show all the cool retrofitted shipping containers that they sold and stuff like that. They were popular because they had air conditioning in most of them. So, if it was really hot out and you're outside, and because it was in July, you'd go in and be like, oh yeah, no, this is very nice. And you'd get cooler in there. Like a resonator ukulele? Maybe. Neil Armstrong's favorite instrument was the theremin. Apparently a song featuring the instrument was one of the things he took to the moon. Nice. Yeah, it's an interesting, it's like if you think of like old 50s like horror or sci-fi movies, when you get that kind of like that kind of noise, like that's what a theremin does, because you got one hand over here that's giving you your pitch near this antenna, and then there's another antenna that goes this way, and you put your hand near it, and the trick is to not just like try to do this with your hand, because that's really hard. So what you do instead is you just do this with your hand, and then as you're getting closer and closer to the antenna, you're making the volume go up and down, or you're making the pitch go up and down. But just doing this with your hand, if you ever watch anybody on YouTube play a theremin, they don't sit there and try to wiggle their hands real fast. They actually just move their like that. It's a little bit easier to do it that way. But it's all about imaginary hand placement in these like magnetic fields around these antennas and stuff like that. But it's one of the earliest electronic instruments, from what I understand. Moving is a hassle. I'm closing in a place the end of this week. Yeah, frankly, I don't want to like move house ever again. I would prefer to just never have to go anyplace else. I think sea box is a more elegant name for shipping container. It does sound elegant. That's true. Let's see here. Do you ever play Quest to Slay the Troggoth King? Plan for 2021 is to Crimson Court, Lumineth, Fox Archer, Cursed City, Witch Hunter, and Shadowstalkers. Wow, that's a lot of stuff. Good luck with that. Let not your flight occur in winter. So much for Wisdom of the Ages. See, there you go. Is Kickstarter a good deal? Do you have any horror stories, or have you had any mainly positive experiences with it? I've had some experiences that have been great with Kickstarter. I've had some, like, I've never not gotten the thing, I don't think. I'm pretty sure everything I've ever done on Kickstarter I've eventually gotten. Very frequently, it's longer than was originally posted. It usually is like, oh yeah, we'll get this and it'll get shipped by this date, and then... one of the worst for me was I got into the Kickstarter for Steve Jackson Games back in like 2012, 2011 maybe. Had a Kickstarter for Ogre, which was their very first game from 35 years ago, or 40 years ago probably at this time. And Ogre was originally sold like in a little plastic Ziploc bag and everything like that. That was like their first game they produced. And then they were like, we're going to do a new 6th edition of Ogre. And when all was said and done, and I did finally get the box for Ogre 6th edition, it was, according to the manifest from FedEx, 27 pounds. It is so big that when I got it home, I'm like, I don't know where I'm going to keep this. I'm like, oh, guest room upstairs. I'll put it underneath the bed in the guest room. That'd be a great place for it. Does not fit underneath the bed. It is a massive, massive box. But they went from it being like little cardboard chips on a board to being still, the stuff is all cardboard, but it's like slotted together 3-dimensional cardboard. So you have like some vehicles in that game. Some of the ogres, like the Mark V Ogre, is like seriously like 5 inches long and probably 3 inches tall. And there's hundreds and hundreds of different models that you put together out of these big, thick pieces of slotted cardboard, and it's massive. That game was like 2 years later than they said it was going to be. So maybe more. But, in general, I've never gotten one of those where they're just like, we aren't sending it, whatever, blah, 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 that kind of thing. I've never had that issue. And I've had plenty of them where they're like, we're going to send it by this date, and they either hit that date or miss it just a touch, or maybe even sometimes a little soon. So, but it is, there are horror stories here and there, but for the most part, Kickstarter's pretty good. There are a lot of companies out there right now that are using Kickstarter, frankly, as just a pre-order system. I'll tell you right up front that I don't really agree with the way that Cool Mini or Not uses Kickstarter, where they're a big enough company that if they want to come out with a new game, they could just come out with a new game. But instead, they put it on Kickstarter, so it's like a pre-order thing, which is But a lot of Kickstarters these days you're doing a Kickstarter because it gives you the marketing edge. Like people talk about Kickstarters. Oh, there's a new Kickstarter from so-and-so. Well, okay, you got some free marketing because now this news outlet says there's a new Kickstarter coming and all that kind of stuff. And so I don't know. I'm of multiple minds. I think it's a great resource for very small companies, or even small companies who don't have the money for this or don't know if this is a thing. We could produce it and everybody could hate it, or we could produce it and everybody could yawn. So if we put up a Kickstarter and nobody cares, then we're not out any money. That's what it's supposed to be for. But when you're a huge company that's going to put out a big product and you know that people want it, look at, they didn't use Kickstarter, they made their own Kickstarter, but Hasbro did that recently with HeroQuest, where they made their own thing I think it's called Hasbro Pulse. So rather than, they were like, well, we don't want to lose money by using Kickstarter and pay Amazon, because Amazon owns Kickstarter. So what we'll do is we'll instead spend that money to make our own version of Kickstarter. Hasbro needs to use Kickstarter? I don't think so. Hasbro could have just taken HeroQuest and just started putting it in stores, and it would have sold just fine. But whatever. Again, it's a marketing thing, generally. But if you're a small company and you're like, I don't know if anyone likes this. I need the money. I know people like this, but I need the money to be able to produce it. I don't have the money to produce it. That's what Kickstarter was for. That's the whole idea. But it's kind of skewing in different angles now, at least in my opinion. Speaking of Kickstarter, my Street Fighter minigame is due to arrive today. Pretty excited. I didn't even know there was a Street Fighter minigame. That's kind of cool. Do you thin your craft paints when using it on terrain? No. 99% of the time, no. I think I may have thinned a paint one time, a craft paint for some reason on terrain, but in general, when I'm using, if I'm painting some terrain and stuff like that, I just use the craft paint full blast. Played Ogre way back in the day with the cardboard counters from a paperback size pack. Yeah, the original, if I remember correctly, it was an add-on, like a stretch goal to the Ogre Kickstarter. So you get this giant honking box, but one of the stretch goals was also a reproduction copy of the original version that came in a little tiny Ziploc bag, and everything fit inside and all that stuff. And it was just thrown into the box because here's another thing. It was a stretch goal, or else you had to pay extra for it. I don't remember, but I do have it someplace. Best new Kickstarter at the moment is Cora Quest. Perfect if you have kids to learn to dungeon crawl. Well, that sounds kind of cool. I've had a bit of bad luck with Kickstarter, but as a percentage, pretty small. And most were early, like 2010 when it was new, and were movie projects or stuff like that. See, yeah, I've predominantly just backed gaming stuff. I haven't backed I backed a Kickstarter from the folks who do Penny Arcade, the webcomic. They had a series of webcomics for a little while that was called Automata. I don't know how you pronounce that exactly. And it was kind of a storyline. It was like alternate history 1920s, except that there are robots. There are normal people and stuff like that, but there are also robots, but they're kind of looked down upon and thought of almost as slaves to some degree, and all that kind of stuff. But they are sentient, and it was a whole thing. And then one of them eventually got to the point where he became a detective, and so then he's got a human partner and all that kind of stuff. And they had made an entire series of webcomics, and it was really cool. And they wanted to make kind of like a web series, like an actual filmed, something that you could see on TV or in a movie or whatever. And so they did a Kickstarter for that. And then it did eventually show up. I got a a Blu-ray or whatever, and it was pretty cool though. Yeah, it was well done. It was real short form and stuff like that, but it was maybe, I don't know, 7 or 8 episodes, and they were all, I don't know, 10-minute episodes or something like that, but it was pretty cool. Uncle Adam, your reckoning of capitalism is skewed. You are conflating it with Friedman's shareholder philosophy. I'm a little behind. I mean, sure, I suppose. I'll say that you're right. I've never heard of Friedman's shareholder philosophy, but it does seem to be the case with most things. Like if you're in normal business, if you didn't do better than last year, well, then you're certainly on your way out. You know what I mean? Like that seems to be the way. Like look at so many people ask about Kill Team. Like, oh, nothing's come out for Kill Team for like 6-8 months. Is it dead? Well, no, they just haven't made anything for it recently. Like the game still works. You can still sit down and play it. You know, admittedly, you can't buy the original box anymore, but if you can find it someplace, you could buy it. You might buy it on eBay and spend way too much money for it. But you can still buy the book. You can still buy the models. You can still buy, you know. But because stuff doesn't come out for it, and therefore, oh, it's dead and it's on its way out. That's not the way these things work. You know what I mean? Anyway, that's my personal opinion. Ogre Pocket Edition. Still have my copy. Yeah, it was very cool. Do you know if you can play 1,000 point AOS in the Games Workshop shop? I don't know if you can play in the Games Workshop shop. I mean, the closest shop to me is still 45 minutes away. The closest Games Workshop branded shop. They're now called Warhammer shops or whatever. But I don't know if there's a table in there. So yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. Robotech is my only true Kickstarter regret. That one is a well-storied trouble, yes, within Kickstarter. Robotech is definitely, yeah. Alternate history. Have you watched Man in the High Castle? Yeah, my wife and I watched it. Liked it until just right up to the end. The end was not good, but the rest of it was actually decent. I liked it. Let's see here. Most of the items I get for Kickstarter have never met the estimated delivery date. However, I have eventually gotten it. When things have an ETA for a year from close to the Kickstarter, I can't get up to a set. Yeah, I mean, I've had some that have showed up quicker, and some that have showed up real close to the date, but they do generally slip a little bit. And I know that for a while Kickstarter was trying to crack down on that. And so what happened was that basically people just started saying, "Oh yeah, well we'll get it to you before 2022," and then they would get it to you, like in 2019. And they're like, "Well, just in case, we had to, and they will usually make that post in the thing saying, "Look, we're going to say the date is this. We believe the date's this, but things might slip, and we don't want to go over because we get in trouble for that or whatever the deal is." I don't even know how that works, but I do know that Kickstarter was trying to crack down on people saying, "Oh, it's coming out at this date," and then missing it by years. But I don't know exactly what that means as far as like, what am I trying to say? I don't know if that means a lot as far as like, well, we're going to make it so that this is the way it has to be. And like, I don't know if there's like, if you can get in trouble, like what do they do? Take your funding? I'm not sure, but they were definitely trying to push the idea of like actually hitting your date. If you could, that'd be great. And so I think that's changed things. GW is now actively discouraging people from doing anything other than game demos in store. Most of the GW stores that I've ever been in have been tiny, so it's not like there's a lot of space in there to hang out and play. I mean, most of the stores, the one that's closest to me is in like Green Bay area, I think, and that one there might be a single gaming table in there, but it might only be like a 3x3, so that it's like, again, you're right, kind of designed more for demos. I mean, for the most part, I don't think that the GW is interested in having you play there in the store. Most of your independent gaming stores usually have space and are interested in having you come in and play and stuff like that, so I would look towards that. But yeah. My local GW has a schedule so you can book tables for games. Interesting. Let's see. I feel like Mordheim probably won't happen, but if it does, I also figure they will change it to fit AOS and it won't really be anything like Mordheim anymore. Yeah, I kind of said that a little bit in the video that I did about Mordheim, where I was like, I have a suspicion that it won't be old world because they'd have to make an entire line of new old world models, which in theory they're working on, Warhammer the Old World, but we still have like no ETA on when that's going to be, and we don't know, is it going to be just all resin? Is it going to be all Forge World? Is it going to be its own thing? Like, what is it? Is it a box game? We don't know. So I went to my local GW store yesterday. They've barricaded 85% of the store with a table fence. They aren't wearing helmets yet. Well, that's good. Yeah, I mean, a lot of stores, like my local independent shop, basically they're just like, there's no gaming in store right now because of the pandemic, which, if you want to come and buy stuff, cool. If you want to call ahead and we'll bring it out to your car, curbside, cool. We'll do that. But he basically is like, it's not safe, we don't think, to have gaming in store. So what he's done is actually, with that whole gaming area, is he's been going back through a lot of his storage, and because he's got a storage, one of those big rental storage lockers that he's been keeping stuff in for a long time, and he's been taking that stuff and putting it on eBay. And now that he's got it in store, he can get rid of the rental storage place. He's got it in store, and then he can sell through that stuff on eBay and make it smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, in theory, so that by the time that he can open up for gaming again, he will have finally gotten rid of all that stuff that was at the storage locker. Because it's hard when you're a one-man band, right? To be able to run the store, but also go through stuff at the storage locker, and then find that stuff and then bring it in and sell it on eBay or whatever. And just having it all in one location, when there's no one in the store, you go back and do some eBay work, and then when someone comes in to buy something, you go sell them some magic cards or some, miniatures or whatever. And then when they leave, you go back. But so yeah, that's his solution, and I think it's working out pretty well. He's been doing good and reducing the pile. But yeah, that's I think a lot of stores are doing that right now. Is they're just either limiting or completely cutting out gaming in store for until things get better. You know what I mean? I've not gone to my GW store because of COVID, but prior to that, the one in Raleigh, North Carolina is great. They did Secret Santa stuff each year and escalation leagues. Oh, that's cool. That's nice to have. Yeah, like I said, the ones that I've seen in near me are all real tiny. Some friends of mine used to have a band. They had some sort of instrument that they said was called a theremin. I think that's right? But it was a dome. Huh, no antenna. A couple of flat metal terminals to it. Well, that's weird. I mean, it could be a different type of theremin. I don't know. GW opened up a new cafe store here in the LA Monrovia area, but too far of a drive for me, as I have 2 stores within 15 miles. Yeah, I saw an email recently or whatever about how they've opened up another kind of like a cafe sort of thing. I mean, they have that Citadel in Texas. I haven't been to that. I've been to Texas only once, and that was in 2019, and I was in Austin for Steve Jackson Games, their first ever convention. Company's been around like 40 years or whatever. They finally had a convention, and I went to that also because I had some friends who lived in Austin, so I wanted to visit them and also go to the convention. So it was like 2 for 1. But yeah. If the old world sells well, I could see Mordheim done as a Forge World / specialist games thing. It's possible. Just before pandemic hit, my GW was running an event for building new armies and coming down to play games each month in a PUG fashion. I don't know what PUG means. Sorry. Pug? Our neighbors across the street have a couple of pugs, but it's not the same thing, I don't think. Pay as you go? Play as you go? I don't know. Yeah, I mean, escalation leagues are a thing that a lot of stores do because it helps to get people, you get people started off, they're like, oh, I'm just going to play these little 500 points, and then you grow to 750, and then you grow to 1,000, and then whatever. And so it helps get people into the stuff. So my FLGS did pretty well during the pandemic since he hasn't needed to order a lot more product. But we have in-store gaming, but it's reservation only with limited slots. I mean, that makes sense. FNORDCon, yep, that was the convention. I went to 2019 FNORDCon. It was fun. I mainly went also because they were showing off, they were basically running betas of Car Wars, the new edition of Car Wars. And I was a big Car Wars fan back in college. We used to play a lot of Car Wars. And so that was one of the recent Kickstarters I got in. And I think they're a little behind where they were planning on being. They were saying we're going to hit this date, and they haven't. But Steve Jackson Games seems to be what they do in general, is kind of miss dates with Kickstarters. It's, it is what it is. But to be fair, COVID. So, you know, I suspect they would have been a lot closer if it hadn't been for COVID. But that's the case with so many things these days. So pickup groups probably makes sense under Pug. That gets more idea. Did you get the Hero Quest Kickstarter? I did not. I never played the original. I know a lot of people got into playing, like, you know, miniatures games because of Hero Quest and stuff like that, but I never played the original, so I was like, I didn't have the nostalgia for it, so I didn't get it. Tip for wet palettes. They are keeping paint wet during a single session, wash out the sponge and paper at the end of painting. I go longer than that. I don't usually like do it every day, but I do wash stuff out of my wet palette probably every week or so, depends. Depends on how much you paint too, so there's that. But I haven't had any trouble ever with any kind of mold or anything like that. Well, folks, it's 11 o'clock in my neck of the woods, 11 o'clock a.m., so I'm going to be going. I got to continue to paint on that Harbinger of Decay and try to finish him up real quick in the, probably maybe even before lunch or right around there. And then, yeah, I've got some other stuff I got to get done and whatnot, and then it'll be Monday and back to work. So I hope that you had a good weekend. I hope that you had fun here at the chat. I hope that if you get a chance and you're interested in playing Warcry, maybe you try out some monsters of your own. Like I said, definitely for me, the Mutalith Vortex Beast, the Terrorgeist. Terrorgeist, like I said, might be the next thing I paint because he's already built and primed. And when I say on paint, I mean on Twitch. Gargant, there's the Ale Guzzler Gargant, which is more destruction, and there's the Chaos Gargant, but they're basically the same model. So yeah, I'll figure that out too. I don't really have any destruction armies yet in Warcry, so I might wait on that. But absolutely, yeah. So I hope that everyone has a good day, and if you're going to be watching some football later on, have fun with that. It's the big day for that kind of thing, if you're into that kind of thing. And we will see you folks in 2 weeks. Otherwise, every Friday, still doing it. And also Twitch, live streaming Monday nights. So tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Central. And also Fridays at 10 a.m. Central. Come and watch me paint some stuff. But I think that's pretty much everything we've got for today. And thanks for coming by. And thanks for watching.